All right, so you want to understand how this new UAE corporate tax law impacts, you personally?
Yeah.
We've got a whole stack of articles and guides right here,
Right.
including this big one from November 2023.
Yes.
It's the official lowdown on how it all applies to individuals. And trust me, some of this stuff is surprisingly interesting. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first.
Okay.
Does this tax even apply to me just because I live in the UAE?
Right.
Do I need to worry about it for my regular salary?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Oh.
This law is really aimed at leveling the playing field for businesses that are operating here.
Okay.
So it would apply to you as a natural person if you're running a business or making specific kinds of income here in the UAE.
Okay.
But just having a job or living here doesn't automatically trigger it.
Okay. Phew. So what about investments?
Yes.
Or rental income that I get from my property here?
Yeah, all of that is exempt.
Okay.
The law makes a very clear distinction between your personal income and income from your business activities.
Okay.
And even then,
Right.
any income from your business activities only becomes taxable if your total turnover from those activities in the UAE exceeds 1 million AED in a calendar year.
Okay. So let's say I have a little side hustle.
Right.
Maybe I sell, I don't know, handmade jewelry online or something like that.
Okay.
As long as I'm not making 1 million dirhams,
Right.
I'm good.
You should be good, yeah. But this is where it gets a little nuanced.
Okay.
The guide's definition of business is actually a little bit broader than you might think.
Okay.
It includes any regular ongoing activities,
Okay.
even short-term ones if they're part of a series of transactions.
Wait a minute. So even selling a few things online could count?
It could.
What if I'm just, clearing out my closet
Okay, yeah.
and selling some clothes?
That probably wouldn't qualify.
All right.
It really all comes down to intention and regularity.
Okay.
So were you actively trying to make a profit when you were selling those clothes?
Right. Okay.
Was it organized? Was it, part of a pattern?
Okay.
The UAE commercial transactions law has a really specific list of activities that are considered commercial business.
Okay.
If you're ever unsure,
Yeah.
it's worth looking into.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's more about being a real business, not just me selling a couple random items.
Exactly, yeah.
But what about those of us who aren't UAE citizens? I'm just here on a visa. Does that change anything?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So unlike some other countries, your physical residency in the UAE isn't actually the deciding factor.
Right.
It's more about where your business activity is taking place. So if you're operating here in the UAE, you're generally considered a resident for tax purposes, even if you have a home somewhere else.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So even if I'm here on a tourist visa, but I'm doing, freelance work for a company based in Dubai, I could still be subject to the corporate tax.
You could. Yeah, you could. And the guide has some really good examples to illustrate this.
Okay.
One scenario involves a consultant who lives overseas,
Right.
but they come to the UAE for a few days of client meetings. They're employed by a foreign company.
Yeah.
And they're not actually running their own business here.
Okay.
So in that case, they wouldn't be considered a resident for tax purposes.
Okay.
But then, there's another example where someone is here on a visa,
Right.
sets up a temporary shop, and starts selling goods. If they make over that 1 million AED threshold, all of a sudden they're considered a resident for tax purposes.
That's so interesting. It seems like a very unique approach.
It is, yeah. It highlights just how focused the UAE is on the actual business activity that's happening within its borders.
Yeah.
It's not about where you lay your head at night.
Right.
It's about where you're making your business income.
Of course, I imagine there are probably some exceptions based on international tax agreements and things like that, right?
There are some exceptions, but for the most part, it really is all about where the business is happening.
That's fascinating. It seems like they're really trying to be fair and transparent about who falls under this tax law.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's say I am considered a resident for tax purposes.
Okay.
And my business makes money from both inside and outside the UAE.
Yeah.
Is all of that income taxable here?
That's another great question.
Yeah.
The general rule is if your UAE-based business is making money both domestically and internationally, then all of the income that's related to your UAE business activities is taxable in the UAE.
Wow.
Even if some of your clients or projects are based overseas.
So even if I'm, working remotely from Dubai for clients in Europe, that income could be taxable here.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it all comes down to where the core activities and resources of your business are located. The guide actually uses the example of a Dubai-based consultant who flies to Europe to give a presentation for a project that they landed here in the UAE. Even though the presentation happens overseas, that income is still considered taxable here.
Wow.
Because, the core business activity originated and is managed from the UAE.
Okay. I'm starting to see how crucial it is to really understand these nuances, especially if you're, working across borders and things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, but let's get down to brass tacks.
Okay.
Assuming I am subject to this tax, what kind of rates are we talking about? Is it going to be a big chunk of my income?
Well, actually, the UAE has a very competitive tax system.
Okay, that's good.
The good news is the first 375,000 AED of your taxable income is taxed at 0%. That's right, zero.
Zero. Okay, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What about the rest of my income?
Sure.
What's the rate after that initial 375,000?
So anything above that threshold is taxed at a flat rate of 9%.
Okay.
And remember, this is on your taxable income, not, your total revenue.
Right.
You can deduct any legitimate business expenses that you incur.
That's actually a lot lower than I was expecting. So even if I'm making like a decent profit, the tax rate is still quite reasonable. Are there any other breaks or benefits for like smaller businesses like mine?
There is. The guide mentions something called small business relief. So if your total business revenue doesn't exceed 3 million AED in a tax period, you might qualify for this relief. Okay. And it could mean that you don't owe any tax for that period.
That's really generous. It seems like they're going out of their way to support small businesses and entrepreneurs here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered like who's taxed, what income is included, and the general tax rates.
Yeah.
But what happens when things get a little more, familial? Like, what if I decide to bring my brother on board to help with my business?
Sure.
Does that create any complications from a tax perspective?
That's a great question. And it actually leads us to like one of the more interesting sections in this guide.
Okay.
It's the concept of related parties.
Okay.
This part of the law is all about ensuring fairness and transparency.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to business transactions between people who have a close connection.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into that in our next segment.
Let's do it. So bringing your brother into the business, that's a great example of where this related parties thing comes in.
Okay.
Essentially, the law wants to make sure that any transactions, between related individuals or entities are done at what's called arm's length. Okay. Meaning, they reflect fair market value. Right. And they're not skewed in any way. Okay. To try to avoid taxes.
So if I'm paying my brother a salary. Right. It needs to be like a reasonable amount, like what I would pay anyone else with his skills and experience.
Exactly.
I can't just give him some, super high salary just to lower my own taxable income.
Exactly. It's all about, preventing people from artificially shifting income around within their family or their company network to avoid paying their fair share. Okay. But how far out does this related thing go?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is it just immediate family?
Right.
What about like, cousins or in-laws?
Well, the law actually defines it as up to the 4th degree of kinship.
Oh, wow.
So that's broader than a lot of people think. And that includes your spouse's family as well.
So even cousins. Wow.
Even cousins, yeah. Okay. And the guide has some really helpful examples to show, how these relationships can affect your tax obligations.
So if I hired my cousin's wife to do some bookkeeping for my business. we would be considered related parties.
You would, yeah.
And I would need to make sure that I was paying her a fair market rate.
Exactly. It's not, it's not about assuming that anyone is trying to do anything shady.
Right.
But rather just having, clear guidelines in place to prevent those potential conflicts of interest.
Right.
And make sure everyone's playing by the same rules.
Okay, I got it. Transparency and fairness are key here.
Absolutely.
Okay, but let's back up for a sec. You mentioned earlier that I only need to register for the corporate tax if my turnover hits that 1 million AED mark.
Right.
What if I have multiple income streams?
Okay.
Like, maybe I have a freelance gig on the side and I have a share in a partnership and then I have, some personal investments. Do I add all that up to see if I hit the threshold?
That's a really good question, and it highlights a really crucial point.
Okay.
Only the income from your business activities within the UAE actually counts towards that 1 million AED threshold.
Right, okay.
So your personal investments, for example, wouldn't be relevant for corporate tax registration.
So I'd basically need to separate out my business income from my personal income.
Right.
And only focus on that business side when I'm figuring out if I need to register.
Exactly. And remember, the guide does provide a pretty detailed breakdown of what constitutes business activity.
Okay.
It even includes some things that you might not have thought of.
Okay, like what?
For example, it even mentions selling artwork. Really? So if you're regularly buying and selling art pieces with the intention of making a profit, that could actually be considered a business.
Really? So if I'm, a painter and I sell, a couple of my paintings on the side, that could be a business.
It could be.
What if I just do it for fun?
Sure, yeah.
I'm not really, concerned about
right.
making a profit or anything.
Again, it really all comes down to the scale and the intent of your activities. So if you're just occasionally selling a few paintings as a hobby, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
But if you're actively building a collection, promoting your work, selling through a gallery, that's a different story. It starts to look more and more like a business.
So the line can get a little blurry sometimes.
Yeah, it can.
What's the best way to know for sure if my activities qualify as a business?
Well, if you're ever in doubt, it's always wise to consult with a tax professional.
Right.
They can help you, really analyze your specific situation and make sure that you're, on the right side of the law.
Okay, that's great advice. Better safe than sorry, especially when it comes to...
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's say I've crunched the numbers.
Okay.
I've looked at all my different, income streams and everything. And I've realized, okay, I do need to register for corporate tax.
Okay.
What's the next step? What's the process like?
Well, the good news is the guide lays out the registration process pretty clearly.
Okay.
So once your business turnover crosses that 1 million AED mark, you have 3 months to register with the Federal Tax Authority.
Okay.
You do this online.
Okay.
And once you're registered, you'll receive, a unique tax registration number.
Okay, that sounds straightforward enough.
Yeah.
And then I assume I'll need to file a tax return each year.
You will, yeah.
Are there specific deadlines for that?
Yes, there are. So your return is due 9 months after the end of the relevant tax period.
Okay.
So for natural persons like you, the tax period is the calendar year.
Okay.
So if your tax period ends on December 31st, you have until the end of September the following year to file your return.
Got it. 9 months after the year ends.
Exactly.
Okay, that gives me plenty of time to get everything organized. Speaking of which, what about keeping track of all my, income and expenses and all that? Are there specific accounting standards or rules that I need to follow?
There are. The guide really emphasizes the importance of maintaining accurate and detailed financial records.
Okay.
You'll need to prepare your financial statements according to the International Financial Reporting Standards.
Okay.
Or IFRS.
IFRS, okay. That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
But there's a bit of a break for smaller businesses. If your turnover doesn't exceed 50 million AED,
Okay.
You can actually use a simplified version called IFRS for SMEs, small and medium enterprises.
Okay, phew. I'm definitely not in that 50 million AD club yet.
Right.
But even with the simplified standards and all that, this still sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Is it something I can do myself, or do I need to hire a professional or something?
It's certainly possible to handle your own accounting,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're comfortable with financial record keeping and things like that. However, a lot of people choose to work with, a professional accountant, especially when they're dealing with like a new tax system like this.
Okay.
They can really help you, make sure that your financial records are up to par.
Okay.
And that you're meeting all the necessary compliance requirements.
That makes sense. It's probably a good idea to at least,
Yeah.
consult with an accountant, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. So I register, I file my tax return.
Right.
I keep my records all in order. Anything else I need to know about, staying compliant with the law?
There's one more important detail about deregistration that might surprise you. So even if your business turnover dips below that 1 million AED threshold
Right.
in a subsequent year, you don't automatically get to deregister.
Wait, really? Why
Right.
why not?
Yeah.
If I'm no longer meeting the threshold for being taxed, why would I need to stay registered?
Well, it's designed to prevent, people from strategically
Okay.
jumping in and out of the tax system too easily.
Okay.
You actually retain your tax registration status unless you completely cease all of your business activities in the UAE.
So I'd basically have to shut down my entire business
Essentially.
to deregister. What if I just want to scale back or
Right.
take a break for a while or something?
Essentially, yeah, you would have to fully cease those activities.
Okay.
And even then you would need to file a deregistration application within 3 months
Got it.
of ceasing your business.
Okay, that's good to know. It seems like a system that's designed to be fair and prevent any kind of
prevent any loopholes.
Loopholes, exactly. But what if my business is a partnership?
Okay.
Do the same rules apply for like registration and deregistration and all that?
That's a great question, and it actually brings us to another really interesting aspect of this law, how it deals with partnerships.
Okay.
And something called the concept of connected persons.
Connected persons.
Let's explore that in our next segment.
Sounds good to me. Let's untangle that web of connections.
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about partnerships and this whole connected persons thing. It sounds kind of like a secret society or something.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not quite that mysterious, but it is an important concept to grasp, especially if you're involved in a partnership.
Okay.
So connected persons essentially refers to individuals who hold positions of influence within a taxable entity.
So think like owners, directors, officers of a company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Think those key players.
So if I'm like a freelancer just working on my own,
right,
I wouldn't have any connected persons because I'm basically a one-person show.
Yeah, that's generally true for sole proprietorships.
Okay.
But when it comes to partnerships, things get a little more interesting.
Okay.
So if you're part of like an unincorporated partnership,
Okay.
you and your partners are actually considered connected persons to each other, as well as to each other's related parties.
Wait, so even though my business partner and I are just, two guys trying to build a company, we're suddenly like entangled in this web of connected persons and related parties.
Yeah. It's all about, ensuring that those transactions within those closely connected groups are conducted, fairly and transparently.
Okay.
It's not about assuming wrongdoing,
Right.
It's just about having a framework in place to prevent those potential conflicts of interest.
Okay, so even if my business partner is my best friend,
right,
and we, trust each other completely,
exactly,
we still need to be mindful of these rules,
right,
and make sure our dealings are all above board.
Precisely. It's about having that system in place, that promotes accountability, and keeps that level playing field for all businesses, regardless of their structure or their relationships.
This is really making me appreciate how much thought and detail has gone into this law. It seems like every possible scenario has been
it's definitely comprehensive.
Yeah.
And it reflects the UAE's commitment to creating a tax system that's fair, that's robust, and adaptable to all these different business models.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. You know, we started off feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all these complexities of the corporate tax, but now I feel like we have a much clearer understanding of how it all works, especially for, individuals like us.
And that's the power of knowledge, right? It empowers us to navigate even these intricate systems with confidence.
Absolutely.
And the more we understand, the rules of the game, the better equipped we are to succeed.
Couldn't agree more. So for all our listeners out there who might be feeling a little lost in the world of corporate tax, remember, stay curious, stay informed, and don't hesitate to seek guidance from a professional.
Yeah, absolutely. If you need it. Yeah. There's a wealth of information available, and you don't have to do it alone.
Absolutely. And keep those stacks of sources coming.
Yeah.
We're always here to help you unpack these complex topics and make them relevant to your life.
Absolutely.
After all, knowledge is only truly valuable when we understand it.
Yeah.
And we can apply it to our own situations.
That's a great point and a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
On this deep dive into the UAE corporate tax law.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy learning.